What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So there's a story that went around and we've heard some very strange ones for the Switch and then the Switch 2, but now one that could pose as a bit of a warning, especially if you're someone who looks into buying used games online, and we'll take a look at that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about an update, it seems, for the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 DRM situation, as the internet's been investigating this, and we may actually have an answer as to what is going on here. And GTA 6 should have its marketing starting up here soon as we head towards the holiday season for this big release, and Strauss Zelnick did weigh in on a few things, which does include maybe some of the pricing we could be looking at here. All of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Guys, we're every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern time, going over the world of gaming news, trying to keep you up to date. So just know, even if you don't get a notification, there's probably a video here to check out. And we're going to start today with a demo that's been released from Square Enix, and that's for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. The demo is out now on the Switch 2 and the Xbox Series systems, and it seems to cover the first 2 chapters for the game. And of course, there are already graphical comparisons popping up online for like the PS5 versus the Switch 2. I think the Xbox Series X specifically, people are kind of already understanding it's going to look very similar to the PS5 version. The Switch 2, though, of course, being a hybrid system, console, docked, and then handheld, people are curious. And I will say, for the most part, it's good enough. I think this is the category it falls into. Essentially, with Rebirth is a bit more taxing than we had with Remake, since Rebirth deals with like much more open areas. And for the most part, it holds up. Now, you're still going to have pop-in, as has been shown in some of these different comparison shots. And then when running through, say, the town, you can have some pretty significant frame drops into the teens. But these will be the first 2 chapters. There's some other parts that I'm curious about later on in the game with how the Switch 2 itself holds up. But I think this bodes pretty well for Square Enix with their Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, that we should be seeing the 3rd one here, I think, pretty soon. But for now, go check out the demo. Your save data will also carry over if you decide to pick up the full game. Also, it looks like there are plans for another Nintendo movie in 2028. We know there's a Legend of Zelda movie in 2027, and we can see this is part of Universal's schedule that they have here that they've laid out. And we can see an untitled Illumination Nintendo event film, April 2028. So they have it listed at April 12th, 2028. But I think most of us are assuming, as it kind of has like the animation thing there, I think most of us are assuming that this would be the Donkey Kong movie. Like, we were already hearing rumors about that. We even just recently discussed the rumors around a Metroid movie. And this isn't too surprising, as Nintendo sees the success they're getting out of the first Mario movie and now Mario Galaxy with the Zelda movie next year. I think that'll do pretty well for them. Yeah, they're fully on board with the idea of just a bunch of movies here going forward. I don't know if they'll keep up the pace of almost like how we're seeing it 2020 this year for Mario Galaxy, next year for Zelda, and then the following year for what we think to be Donkey Kong, like a yearly release of movies. But certainly, I think they're making a big push now. So I also wouldn't mind that if the quality is there. And I feel like the Donkey Kong movie will be fairly similar to what we're seeing out of the Mario movies. And that's one of the reasons I'm so curious to see how this Legend of Zelda movie turns out, because it's certainly going to stand out from really the animation stuff we've seen so far. Oh, and we did get a release date for The Blood of Dawnwalker. We can see this over on Gamatsu, where they say the open world dark fantasy action RPG that'll launch for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series, PC. That's through Steam and Microsoft Store on September 3rd. That's from publisher Bandai Namco and developer, of course, Rebel Wolves. This will launch at the standard price of $70. There's also an Eclipse edition, kind of their deluxe edition there, at $80. And I even saw the system requirements on PC. Yeah, I mean, you need a pretty decent build to play this thing. They even flashed like the 5090 up there for some of the epic settings all the way to the right side of the chart. Not that it's necessary to play that, of course, but if you really want to go all out, yes, you will need a super, super top-of-the-line card. But people were, of course, reacting to this as exciting for, like, Witcher fans, of course, were like, oh, this is something that I think is going to fall right in line with what I enjoy out of, like, The Witcher 3. So, good stuff there. And finally, getting that release date. I think a lot of these games, big titles, are going to try to get out definitely ahead of GTA 6, that coming in November, which we'll actually get to here a little later on in the show. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with a very strange story that popped up for the Switch 2, but I wanted to bring it up here because I think it will be something that will most likely happen again, and I say that because we saw an entire thing happen with the Switch 1, with the googly eyes. Remember that? Where sealed Switch games were getting sent out, or even bought in store, and people were opening up and they were finding a little craft googly eye and some plastic in there. The eye was kind of to mimic the shaking or the rattling of a cartridge inside of the sealed case, and it seemed like, I don't know, a group of people or one person or something were able to lift the cartridges out of there and then reseal the games themselves, the cases. Well, now we may have people out there removing the actual circuit, the chip itself inside the case, or just sending out fake cases completely, and that becomes problematic because it can also damage your Switch 2 system. So, like we can see, this is over on Reset Arrows, shared by Joker there, saying, I found a warehouse deal for Pragmata on Switch 2 and thought, great, it's discounted for a new game I wanted to play. They've bought several warehouse games from Amazon. Didn't think too much about it at that time. They then got the case in, this little red Switch 2 cartridge, popped it in the Switch 2, nothing was happening, got stuck in the system, attempted to eject it, had to actually pry it out of there, and now the Switch 2 will not read any games because the pins themselves in there are damaged. So what happened was they then posted, after people were requesting, images of it, and the front, you can see, it looks okay, there's a Pragmata, sure, okay, but then you flip it over on the back, yeah, it's missing the chip inside of the case. Now, you can, as I've shown many times now on this channel, you can open up these casings pretty easily, actually, and then you can glue them back together, and as long as you're careful around the edges there, it'll look pretty standard, like it won't really be able to tell that you've broken it apart. And when you don't have a chip in there, the circuit for it to push up against with those pins, yeah, it'll get lodged in the plastic here and would most likely, unfortunately, mangle up any of those pins inside of your Switch 2 system. Now, the other part that's kind of unfortunate here is the cartridge slot itself is just part of the board, whereas what we've seen in like the Switch 1, it was something that could just be disconnected and then you can drop in a new one there to fix it. So that would be kind of frustrating. There's some solder work and stuff involved with that. But again, I wanted to bring this up because if you do decide to order a Switch 2 game used online, my recommendation is before you put it in your Switch 2, flip it around and make sure, yes, there are brass contacts there and that the chip is actually inside of the cartridge, and you should be able to see that very, very easily. And it's kind of like lesson learned. I wasn't already expecting this to happen, especially coming out of, you assume, an Amazon warehouse purchase. Like, you figure that those would at least be checked somewhat. Although there are a lot of third-party sellers that go through that as well. But I don't necessarily know if the circuit board got lifted during shipping or something. It legitimately just seems like somebody, I guess, sold the little casing there, whether it was 3D printed, faked, or having that cartridge with the circuit board removed. And then, yes, you end up with a damaged Switch 2. So just want to throw that out there. A bit of a warning in case you're shopping around. Or if you can get images of the cartridge before you even buy it, make sure they flip it over, or if you're on eBay selling, show both sides of the cartridge so people know you're not sending them a blank cartridge that would, yes, then damage their system. So very odd stuff. Let me know if this has happened to you at all, because this seems to be the first case of this that I've seen so far. Next up, let's talk about this Sony DRM situation for their PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. And this has been a hot button topic online, people going back and forth, and for the most part, Sony just being quiet outside of an AI chatbot that you can do for customer service, which I will say isn't a great source, because I've seen these chatbots just at one moment say one thing and the next completely contradict itself. So you basically at this time would need a full statement, like from an official Sony spokesperson, to clear a lot of this stuff up. However, the internet, of course, investigating, trying to figure it out for itself, and now we're seeing some, at least, explanations here that at least makes some sense. So this we can see, this is over on Reset Era from Ann Shrew, who went through an entire explanation after testing some things out. And essentially what we're seeing here is a temporary license. Okay, so the idea, okay, 30 days, so you buy a game, all right, and then there is a 30-day license for the game that's installed, and it becomes permanent after 2 weeks, so 14 days. And what people are now thinking is, okay, so after those 2 weeks, it will then turn into a permanent one. Is that because of the 14-day refund window? Well, with games through Sony, if you buy one, if you then download it, you're not able to refund it, all right? So I've gone through this myself. There have been accidental purchases with the kids where I think they bought Indiana Jones and I got a notification. I'm like, well, I didn't buy that. So let me just go check, and I go in the room and they're already downloading the PlayStation 5 version. And then, you know, you put the passcode on so that they can't just start buying stuff like randomly. But because I have that experience, I know I had to talk to 3 different people on the phone, not automated, and then they do the thing where like, okay, this one time, we'll go ahead and refund it for you. So I do know that if you go through the process of buying and then downloading, you're not easily able to refund it. But what's going around currently is that there was an exploit that was discovered to where you can buy a game, not download it, but then still be able to get the license from Sony's server and then refund the game because it would show that it wasn't downloaded, but you still have access to it. That at least is kind of the word going around at this time. And what we're seeing from Sony is a way for them to try to fix this on the back end. Now, Ryan was able to test this in a video yesterday that he posted, where he had a game that was just outside of that 14-day mark. So it was in April, and he had it added to his account. All right, and then after 14 days, you can see he did download it, pulled the CMOS battery to check, and it did work. It still was able to play without any issues. So that's kind of where we are now. My only issue with this whole thing is Sony clearly pushed this, and they had to assume somebody was going to notice. And now if you look online, it has spiraled completely out of control to where, yes, it is like, oh, it's a 30-day check-in. Sony is making it so they take away your license from you. That's the whole thing right now. Not necessarily just, oh, you have to go back online and check in again. So it's a PR nightmare, and Sony is just not saying anything. And you know what? I kind of feel like they won't. So the whole thing with the C-bomb thing, that seems to have popped up again, as that's how we're kind of testing this stuff out right now, because it falls within the 14-day window if you just bought a game. So that's something they would have to work to patch or fix, maybe in a firmware update down the line, similar to what they did with the original C-bomb issue that we had with physical games. They were able to fix it, but they never said anything about it. So I'm kind of thinking that's what's going to happen here. And as much as they do want to ignore it, whenever they post something right now on social media, look under it with the replies. It's just like constant, hey, 30 days, 30 days, check in, like what's going on with DRM. So it might not be a bad idea for them to at least put something out there about this. Still, though, it was on their side, apparently, to fight back with some kind of exploit, with piracy and kind of the hacking side, so they may not want to even acknowledge that. At least now we have some kind of an explanation as to what we're seeing here. You buy a game digitally, 30 days, of course, for a license that gets attached to it, but after 14 days, it becomes permanent. Before then, it's in that 14-day window, it is considered temporary because you fall within this refund period that they've set up previously. Next up, let's stick with DRM here for a moment because, of course, Denuvo, it's something that makes PC gamers out there shudder to hear. It's a very frustrating, kernel level anti-tamper, anti-piracy measure that many of these publishers employ for these PC releases. And it's frustrating because most of the time it degrades performance, so that if you are somebody who has pirated the game and you've broken Denuvo, you're probably having a better experience than the person who paid money for it. Well, now it seems that Denuvo has been like completely cracked, or to the point where it's able to have its calls intercepted. So like you can see, this is over on Tom's Hardware saying in late 2025, MK Dev Collective and the prolific Denuvo Woe came up with a hypervisor-based bypass, HVB, that installs a kernel-level driver to intercept and respond to Denuvo's checks. So it didn't necessarily crack Denuvo, it kind of tricks it, but that's enough to where Denuvo is like rendered useless at that point. It's just not going to do the functionality that it's supposed to at that time. Well, of course, 2K and some other publishers seem to be taking the extra step, as Denuvo and 2K reportedly just added a 14-day mandatory online check-in to several titles. That includes NBA 2K25 and NBA 2K26 and Marvel's Midnight Suns. Now, this is impossible for HVB to emulate, as it's a request response call to Denuvo servers, and thus, in practice, can't be replicated. So there you go. It's, again, we just talked about Sony's situation with their 14-day temporary license that then converts to a permanent license. In this case, they're just like, nah, it's going to be a just 14-day check-in. That's it. Because Denuvo, again has to the point where it's not really doing its job because of the efforts of the community trying to crack it. So 2K and Take-Two and stuff like, whatever, we'll go the route of you just gotta connect to the internet and check in, or it won't work. And that, of course, is frustrating when it comes to the single-player games. But that's kind of the way it seems to go on PC. It's like they gotta make sure it can't be pirated, even though I do still believe, at the end of the day, if you make a game that people want to play and they want to support, they will indeed buy it. I say that, and then we see things like Hollow Knight Silk Song at $20. Have a massive thread online because there's no DRM attached to it and it's getting pirated all over the place. So I don't know, but that's the next step seems to have been taken here by 2K. You just got to do some mandatory calls to the server every couple of weeks. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Strauss Zelnick, who did talk a bit about GTA 6 and alluded maybe to some of the pricing for it, and then even had a bit of a call out for LA Noire, which was super random, but like we can see this over on IGN. And this is speaking at Icon, I'm gonna say. That was the other day, a new conference for video game executives. Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick addressed the much debated question of how Grand Theft Auto 6 will cost. What is the price tag for what is, can only be described as a generational title, especially when it comes to, the cost to make it, saying, quote, consumers pay for the value that you bring them, and our job is to charge way, way, way less of the value delivery. How you feel about something you buy is the intersection of the thing itself and what you pay for. Consumers need to feel like the thing itself is amazing, and the price they were charged was fair for what they got. If you look at it through that lens, that being that overall game prices, and a lot of these executives' minds have gotten pretty cheap, even at $70. So like, hold on, look at inflation and stuff. But he says that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that isn't the lens through which we look. Instead, we look at how do we deliver something amazing, and how do we make sure that what people pay for it feels reasonable. And look, here's the thing with something like a GTA 6. If you spend $70 on a game like that, and we'll say even online is attached to it, and you play the game for hundreds of hours, you're probably going to recommend it to somebody else because of how much time you got out of it, the amount of enjoyment you probably got out of it. And that's really the idea here is 60 at that time for GTA 5, or 70, we'll say. Right now, we'll see if they want to test the waters further for GTA 6. That might feel like you got one over on them. Like, wow, I spent a lot of time with this game. I feel like I got my value here, so I'm going to recommend it to other people. And I think that's the right approach to take if you are Take-Two, Rockstar, and you're looking around going, hey, we would sell a crazy amount of copies if the thing was $50, and then we'll have a bunch of people on GTA Online. I don't think they'll do that. I think they'll still sell it for $70 or $80, but I also think people won't be deterred at all by that. They might not be deterred by $100, but I think 70 or 80, they'll still be buying in droves. Oh, and a quick bonus here, as interestingly asked about LA Noire, saying, broadly, we're looking at doing something in the future with all of our intellectual property. There's nothing to announce on LA Noire specifically, and if there were, it would be Rockstar announcing it, not me. But in any case, with regard to our legacy IP, the teams are always looking at what we have, and we're always thinking about it. The question is, at any given time, do we have a team that's passionate about working on that? LA Noire would be an interesting one now, because back then I remember playing on 360 and it felt super ahead of its time with a lot of the facial animations, because that's how you would try to figure out if somebody's lying to you, like some kind of tell. And I remember the way that the faces would move. It was almost, at the time, Uncanny Valley feeling, sort of. It's like, wow, there's some pretty serious detail with the way that these characters are kind of emoting. And I'm curious what they'd be able to do now. That was on the 360, the PS3. Like, what would they be able to do, we'll say with, this time in a couple years still, the PlayStation 6 or the Xbox Helix? Like, what level could they reach when it comes to, like, facial animations and trying to read these people and their tells? That would, I think, be something else. But for now, they are obviously focused full speed ahead on GTA 6 as they're looking to release that later this year in November. And before we go to the comments of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, have you owned an Xbox Series console so far this generation? 51% say no, 49% say yes. And you can kind of see how we've been sort of working away from the Xbox 360 results, which were much more favorable. Right, in terms of, yeah, of course I had a 360, and we've kind of worked now to where you're seeing majority no for like the Xbox series. And it's just kind of the way that Xbox has trended really since the end of the 360 generation. It was kind of losing some steam there towards the end, but people were pretty excited and hopeful for what ended up becoming the Xbox One. But up to that point was being rumored as the Xbox 720. Remember, those are the good days. And then Don Matcher takes the stage, and it really has been kind of all downhill since then, which is mind-blowing to think about, that he still has that kind of effect. And he was probably losing his mind looking on social media at the discussion around DRM recently with PlayStation and stuff. But I do believe that in 5 or 6 years, we'll say, if he had done a similar presentation, maybe still not so crazy about the DRM 24-hour check-in and stuff, he would have been a bit more in line. It would have been a bit more accepted, I think, in a few years versus what he attempted to pull off way back in 2013. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Sensul, who says, "Man, I remember discovering ZSNES when I was in 5th grade and being so excited to get home from school and play all the Japanese Dragon Ball Z Super Famicom games we didn't get in the West." Yeah, there were a whole bunch of them, and it was awesome. So we had Super Butoden, which the first one wasn't as good because the second one and then the third one, you had the thing where the screen would split. So if you got too far away from your opponent, because it's like a 2D fighting game, you go up in the air or on the ground, but if you got too far away, it would split the screen, right? And so you'd have like a line between the two of you, and if you pulled off a special move when it was in that situation, it would go to a whole cutscene where like the screens would flip and you'd be at the top, and then you'd fire this massive ki blast, and depending on the combination they put in, they would deflect it or stop it or just get hit by it. Those were the good days. There was also one for the Genesis, and I didn't play that one as much, but man, those are crazy days because Dragon Ball was really picking up steam in the West, and we didn't have much else to go on in terms of video games. So it was pretty funny to play those games in like, I don't know, 30% translation status, so the menus looked all messed up, but still people, of course, worked to put up guides and all kinds of things. It was a different time back then, and don't even get me started on Dragon Ball Z Hyper Dimension. That was certainly a moment in time. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you want to check out the Spawncast episode from this past weekend, which is a weekly podcast. We get together and talk about the events of the past week in video games. I'll leave that right below. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.